So we're going to make waterproof, reusable isolation gowns for our medical staff. I just went to Walmart and just bought the fabric shower liner. They're pretty standard size, no big deal there, but it is fabric that's been treated to be waterproof instead of plastic. The plastic won't work. So I have taken it, opened it up, and I have folded it in half lengthwise. And I'm actually going to cut 3 out at the same time. But let me just show you what I did. I folded it exactly in half, and all of the finished side edges of the shower curtain liner are lined up. And it goes right across the top like that. And the reason I did that is it saves me a step later on. I'm going to cut out one of my pattern pieces on this edge, and it's already hemmed and I don't have to worry about it. Alright, so that's the preparation for our fabric and or our shower curtain. So I came up with 2 pattern pieces, a front and a back. They're identical. And I'm the kind of person that I like to have pattern pieces. So I used up my old Christmas wrapping paper, Merry Christmas everybody, to make this gown pattern. And I checked with my daughter, as she's an NP, and these are the specifications, I guess, that they would like. I'm going to lay 1 pattern piece on this edge over here, this folded edge. And what will happen is, when we open this up, this will become the front, and it'll be double, of course, without a seam. So let me pin that in place. And also remember, this does not have to be totally exact because it is a giant tent, basically, that they're putting on. So we don't have to worry about 1/4 inches and stuff like that. We're just getting the gist of it. If you don't want to do a pattern piece, you literally can draw this on your fabric. And I just happen to be one that wants pattern pieces. So this edge here, place on fold. I'm not going to cut this edge. I'm just going to cut here all the way out, the rest of it around, and that will give me a gown front. Okay. And wherever possible, also to speed things up, I was cutting them out with the rotary cutter. Okay, now I'm going to turn this around so you can see where I place the other one. Let's see if I turn it this way, how much we can see. That can go there now. Alrighty. You're going to get 1 gown out of each shower curtain. I have been looking for a place to buy some similar fabric online so I can buy it by the yard, but I haven't had any luck yet, but I'll keep looking. Okay, so now you can see the gown front is placed on the fold. I'll finish pinning it in a minute. The gown back, it is the exact same size, it's the same pattern piece, but instead I'm going to place it on this edge right here because it saves me a step later on because this is already hemmed. Otherwise, I would have to hem it. So I just found a way to cheat a little bit, do it a little bit quicker. Alrighty. So both of my pieces would be fully pinned down, and I would zip, 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 cut them out. Both pieces, remember, they're exactly alike. I dropped down 2 inches and just kind of drew about a 4-inch curve right here to create the neckline. Otherwise, it would cut their neck. So anyways, just the exact same on both pieces. Drop down, cut it out about 4 inches, and you can see that's where it would have been, and now I've made a neck hole. So that was something that they asked for. They wanted it to be close enough that it really covered up along their neckline. They don't want it to be too open. And as you can see, I'm using up almost all of my shower curtain. You have a little bit left down here. I would say hang on to this just in case. If for some reason you don't find the grosgrain or something to make the ties with, we can use this in a pinch to create a tie. So I hung on to it just in case, but actually I find the easiest thing that I used was grosgrain ribbon. Alrighty. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and cut these out, and then I'll show you how we're going to start putting them together. See up here, I cut that same exact neck hole line out of the gown front. Remember, this one's on the fold. I'm not going to cut down here. I'm just going to cut the outside of this out. And if you were making it for somebody specific, you could modify this easily. If somebody was particularly tall and needed longer sleeves. These sleeves as it is are quite long. My daughter checked it out on her fellow nurses, and they said this was plenty long, but it's an easy adjustment. There we go. Also, when I sew this, when I get to this corner here, I don't even rotate the corner. I literally just zoom right around it. You'll see that when we sew it. And this is 50 inches long before you hem it. And it pretty much covers them almost, give or take depending on how tall they are, almost to their ankles, which was one of their things they needed. Now I'm cutting through 3 curtains. This is incredibly easy. I could probably do 6 at a time if I happen to have 6 curtains available. I made one out of that plasticky woven liner, and they all said it was okay in a pinch, but it made them too sticky. Alright, so here's gown front. Alright, I have one gown front cut out, and of course when I open this up, it'll be double. When I open this up, it'll be double, and that's the front with no seam. The other thing I did, when this is still folded, I went ahead and cut a notch. I'm just one of those people. I have to know where my center is for whenever I'm working with the neckline. Alright, so I'm just going to stick this aside for a minute and work on the cutting out the back piece. This one is going to open up into 2 pieces. A right back, a left back. A right back, a left back, and a right back and a left back. Okay, so here's that piece, that strip I said. I'm going to hold on to it just in case for some reason I couldn't find ribbon to make long straps. So I'll just set that aside and hang on to it. Although I do have ribbon to make the ties for today. Okay, so now this is the gown back, and there would be 2 pieces for each gown back. And that's all you're going to cut out. It's just 2 pieces. The sleeve's already built in. So I'm going to undo these, pin some pieces together, and we can start sewing. I'm just going to do the beige one so that you can see what I'm sewing on today. The other ones I'll put away for later. Okay? Alrighty. Put that one there. Alright, so here are my pattern pieces. Now watch, this is the piece that I placed on the fold. And remember, when I flip it open, here's your gown front. Okay, and I couldn't really tell if there was a right or a wrong side, so I will just tell you that I personally liked the bumps facing me on the outside of the garment, so I am treating the divots as the wrong side of the fabric, but truthfully it's not going to make one bit of difference. Okay, So this piece, technically, my front, is now facing me right side up. I'm going to take my two backs, and remember, you've already cut, leaving that nice finished edge there. So that's a seam we don't even have to worry about. And I'll put my back on top of here. I'll line those up. When I sew this, I'm going to sew the two shoulder seams across and across, and then the underarm and side seam, and that's it. Goes together really fast and easy. Get over here and pin better. Alrighty. And I've been using the serger to put this together. If you don't have a serger, I would zigzag the seams, and the reason I say that is because these are going to go through a lot of washings. So protect your seams a little bit if you can. But if you have a serger, it goes together even faster. That was one of the requirements they asked for. Lightweight, waterproof, can be washed over and over, and easy to get in and out of. Alright, so I have my two shoulder seams pinned together, and I'm going to sew each of these seams across. While I have this in my pins here, I'm going to go ahead and pin my side seam a little bit, and then I'll show you where we're sewing those. And to be honest, once I get going, I stopped pinning. I just eyeballed it and go. I'll just put a few pins just so it doesn't shift while I'm moving around. Pretty much expect to find this on the Paris runways. Super fancy dress. All right, I'm going to go ahead and sew my shoulder seam here. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Sew that shoulder seam. Then I'm going to sew from my sleeve, and I'm just going to do one continuous sleeve, turn the corner, and go all the way to the end of the gown. You could do that in reverse if you wanted to start at the bottom and come up. So I'm going to knock out these 4 seams right away. All right, I'm going to use my serger to sew my 2 shoulder seams. I do have all 4 threads in because remember, I'm trying to make it withstand multiple washings. So I'm just running it through. And there's my stitch right there. And I'm pinning it to make sure it's good for right now, but truth be told, once I get rolling, I didn't even pin it. I just held it in place and just kept on stitching. Okay. Okay, there's one shoulder seam, and I'm just going to keep right on going and do the next shoulder seam. Just straight stitching. Okay, shoulder seams are done. So now you have this big, looks like a hospital gown, because it is. All right, I'm going to do the exact same thing to my underarm sleeve, right on down to the side to the hem. Alrighty. And these armholes are cut big enough to go over their scrubs or lab coat, whatever they happen to be wearing. Okay, this is that point I told you I did not even worry about making a point here, you know, a nice sharp corner, because it's just a big sack. I literally am just going to run it and keep going around the corner. Okay, there's one side seam done, and you can see here, there's my underarm curve. Easy peasy. Alrighty, now I'm going to do the other side, and you will have a gown, and we'll finish it up. All right, we have a hospital gown, or an isolation gown for caregivers, 2 arms. All we have to do now is finish our neck edge, hem the bottom, and put our ties on. So you can do 2 kinds of cuffs. You can make a casing, you know, turn under the raw edge, turn it under again and stitch it in place, and then run your elastic through there. That's fine. It does have to have some kind of elastic or closure so that it's tight around their wrist and can go inside their exam gloves. I opted to use some rib knit, and I just sewed the 2 edges together, just like you see on your sweatshirts. And this, I found, it worked for me, but you could do whichever one you wanted. I've done a couple with elastic, and I've done a couple with the rib knit. There was no right or wrong. Once I sewed those 2 short ends together, I fold it in half again, and you can see, just like on my sleeve here, it's your cuff, just like that. And that's what I have there. And I'm going to put this on the end of each sleeve. But before I do that, remember I told you I'm a person that has to have centers always marked. So I'm going to mark my center. And I'll just attach it to the bottom of the sleeve, stretching it to fit the sleeve. And I'll do that while we're sitting here. All right, so here's our sleeve. There we go. And I actually find it easier to work this from the right side of the fabric. I've turned my sleeve in this way. I like having the rib on the outside when I'm running it across the machine. Okay, so you have your seam here, and then I mark the other side, the other center directly across, and then I just line them right up with the 2 seams. It makes it easy peasy. Okie dokie. So here we go. So see, I'm taking this seam and I'm putting it to the seam of this rib knit. Then I fold it in half and then pin. And I'm going to do the same thing, this seam. And remember, I had my pin mark the other opposite side of my cuff, and I'll pin that in place. And this piece of rib knit, I cut it 8 inches long, stretchy, by 6 inches. And that seemed to work pretty good here. And then I literally am going to stretch it and serge it right along these edges, and bingo, have a cuff. And I do have to take this off to make that happen. All right. And it just so happens when you take the sleeve, the arm cover off your machine, it turns out to be the perfect guide for this. It made it so convenient and easy. All right, I'm going to stretch that up there. And again, remember, it's all going to get gathered into the cuff, so don't worry about exactness. It's just not something you have to worry about. Okay, I don't know if you can tell, I am stretching this cuff to fit the actual sleeve, and as I go, I'm just going to keep stretching and stretching and stretching and sew it all the way around. And I go right over top of where I started, and I just overlap a little bit. Because again, remember, I'm trying to make it last. And here you would have one of the cuffs. So they would put their hand in, and boom, they have their cuff. And what happens is this is a little trimmer. So when they put their gloves on, she said it makes it easy to slide the gloves up on over top of this by having this cuff here. Okay? So I'll just do that real quick on the other one. I took a piece of rib knit and I cut it 6 inches by 8 inches. The long 8-inch side is the stretchy side. I sewed the 2 short ends together. Then I turned it wrong sides together to create this nice little cuff. Okay, other cuff is done. That was easy peasy. Alrighty, so the only thing left that we have to worry about is the neckline, the hem, and attaching the front tie. Next thing I'm going to do is we're going to do the neckline, but before I sew that, I want to make one mark. They like to have the gowns tie from the front, crisscross in the back, and then come all the way back around the front to tie. So that's why we have this incredibly long tie. But I just found that for most people, in the center, I just made a mark at roughly 19 inches down. And again, I based this on my daughter's recommendations because these are the ones that she likes. I just made this little mark right here in the front of the gown, and you're going to use that later because we're going to attach the tie to the front, and that way my mark's just already there. It's just something to have done ahead of time. All right, so put that aside. So we're going to work on this neckline. This also, I just started finding the easiest way to do things. You can serge this neckline, which would be fine, but again, I keep worrying about how many launderings it can go through. I think it's easiest if we use bias tape, double fold bias tape. So what I did, I got double fold bias tape, 1/2 inch wide, and I cut these. Let me see if this is one I've already cut. Let's see here. Yep, I cut it 42 inches long, and the reason is that covers the neckline, and it also creates the back neck ties all at the same time. And you know how I am, I have to have my centers marked. I don't know why. I must have had a home ec teacher that made me do it 100 times. Alrighty. So, because we marked the center of our gown, we know right where that is. I put my tape over the gown, and I marked the center of the tape to that center notch we cut earlier on, and I'm going to pin that in place once I have pins. And I don't know if you've realized this or noticed this, but on bias tape, it's folded in half, but one side is just a hair shorter than the other. I am using that shorter side up front toward me so that I'm positive when I'm sewing that slightly longer side will get caught by the needle when I sew it. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of eyeball this around to the end of the edge of the back. Okay, here we go. So here's the back neck edge. Remember, it's already finished off because we lined it up on the edge of that shower curtain. I'm going to fold that over. This is really the only pin I'm going to have to use probably. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start sewing at the end of here, and I'm going to sew this closed all the way down. Then I'm going to keep sewing this on top of this neckline all the way around, right out to the other end of here, which means now I have my neck edges finished and I have my ties already applied. Getting this set up, I'm just using a basic straight stitch, and remember I'm just going to sew right along that edge to close that up. And again, it is going to be washed and laundered and tossed and so forth. Okay, so I'm just going to run this across. This is closing up the bias tape and turning it into a necktie. And really, this is the only one I pinned. The first one on, just so that it is lined up about where I want it to be. Okay, the rest of the way, I'm going to position my machine so that the needle stays down. The rest of the way, I'm just going to finger pin this each time, opening that up, and sew it a few inches at a time. You don't have to worry about pinning. And I think this is a pretty solid neckline to survive wanderings. I'm going to go right off the end. And I'm just going to keep on going, and it ties or closes up what would be the necktie. And there we have our neck on our gown. And at the end of this, I just took it and tied it in a knot to close it off, you know. And that's how I just finished off the end of both ties. So here you have your neck. This would be the back. Here's your ties. And there's the front. Our cuffs are done. The only thing we have to do is hem it and put our front tie on. I'm going to do the front tie now, and then we'll hem it last. All right, before we do the final hem, let's go ahead and put this front tie on. And that was the reason I said we should make that mark down. And remember, it is roughly 19 inches straight down from the neckline. This is the one where we really do have to mark this center piece that I'm always yakking about. This is 3 yards long. I'm using grosgrain ribbon, but you could probably use twill tape. If you didn't have any of that, all that leftover piece that I cut off, we really could slice this and make one long tube and either turn it inside out or hem the edges in, but I have grosgrain ribbon. So this piece is going to be placed right smack in the front of their belly, like so. This is the center of the ribbon, and I'm placing it right over my center mark. There we go. And I'm going to just stitch it in place. Oops. Here we go. I'm going to go about, I don't know, 3 inches out from the center. So I'm going to sew from about here to here. And that will just anchor this in place so that when they put the gown on, they're not fumbling looking for where the ties are. They're right in front of them. And they wrap them around behind them, crisscross them, and bring them back to the front. And that's why it's so long, because remember, it's also going over their underneath clothing, scrubs, etc. So I'm going to put this on, and that part's done. All right, when you sew this on, you can do whatever way you want. You can just do a straight stitch, you could do a zigzag stitch, anything you want just to keep it in place. I'm actually going to do a zigzag stitch that has a couple of stitches each time, each corner it makes. I think I described that okay. Alrighty. So I back tack it a little bit to make sure it's in good. And back tack it again, and that's the end of that. So this ribbon is ready to wrap around them. The only thing you have to finish on this is the hem, and I just did a super easy hem. I'm going to press under 1/2 inch and 1/2 inch again, and run a straight stitch, and we're done. All right, so the bottom edge, we're going to hem it, and I just did that by turning under a 1/2 inch on the raw edge, and I turned under another 1/2 inch. I did use an iron on this. I used a very cool iron. It did not change the water repellent properties of it, but at the same time, it is somewhat treated, so I certainly don't want to melt anything. So I just used a cool iron, and really and truly, you could almost turn it with your fingers as you sew it. It's just a basic 1/2 inch hem, done deal. Back tack everything. And that's the end of it. That's the completed gown. Okay, this gown is all done and ready to go to somebody who's at work today.